So it is that time of year again for the obligatory top 10 video games of the year. And I know what you're thinking. I know. Cosmic, you're on camera for one, and two, you have a Christmas hat on. You've had too much eggnog. And you're absolutely right. So, Merry Christmas, cosmonauts. Enjoy the video. Oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah. That's good. Coming in at number 10 is XCOM 2, the long-awaited sequel to the XCOM reboot developed by Firaxis and published by 2K Games. It was something that many had been very excited for, and some had viewed with a degree of skepticism, simply because sequels often go one of two ways. They are either really, really good, or they go completely off the rails and derail an entire franchise. Thankfully, XCOM 2 was fantastic, minus a few technical issues here and there. The whole game was solid through and through. Many thought that they would once again return in terms of setting and story to the defense of the planet, where the aliens would be invading, which would have been a very safe thing to do. Instead, we got placed in the role of the resistance. The aliens had already won the war, they took control of Earth, and now the commander returns to lead the resistance against the Advent regime. The transition from a stationary base to a flying base, the emphasis on guerrilla warfare, and the focus on shedding the gameplay issues that plagued the first game and were much improved in the second, led to a well-rounded turn-based strategy game that will be a fan favourite for some time to come. A absolutely fantastic turn-based strategy game. Loved the permadeath, loved the story, loved the setting, and the improvements made from the first were well worth its deserved place on my list. My number 9 is Atlas Reactor. Atlas Reactor is a game that completely blindsided me in every which way. It was not on my radar before, but as soon as I played it, it sure as hell was on my radar after that. The multiplayer-focused turn-based strategy game was an absolute marvel to behold. It took two of my favourite things and combined them into something that was truly phenomenal. Turn-based strategy and multiplayer games. And it was something that very few people have done in the past, and even fewer have executed well. Putting a turn-based strategy into a multiplayer team-focused game is something that on paper sounds like it's going to be awful, and yet the team produced something that was not only memorable but had a little bit of magical in there too. All the characters were diverse, unique, had a fun story, a fun plot. Each character had personality, unique mechanics, unique gameplay. Combine that with team objective based gameplay, and what you had was a breakout star of the year. This year's number 8 is Titanfall 2. For me, out of the 3 games that were released in the October-November period of Titanfall, Battlefield 1, and of course Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, I have to say for me Titanfall 2 was the better shooter out of the 3, and sadly did not accrue many sales thanks to EA's stupid decision to release Titanfall 2 right smack bang in the middle of Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Titanfall 2 improved upon the original in so many ways. It addressed almost every single problem that people had with the original game. Thanks to the addition of a single-player campaign that was not only in there, but was a really good single-player campaign with fantastic levels, interesting gameplay elements. Add to that the much improved multiplayer with the majority of the different Titans, the different loadouts, new weapons, and of course the fact that there was no season pass that would divide the community. Titanfall 2 shed almost all of its complaints from the original game and produced a sequel that was just phenomenal from start to finish. Coming in at number 7 is Duelist. Duelist is a competitive, turn-based tactics CCG game developed by Counterplay Games. Duelist was a game that on paper looked like a Hearthstone clone, but instead of cards it had animated characters, but turned out to be so much more than that. The game took everything that people love about games like Hearthstone, such as the core mechanics of the game, the way minions work, the RNG factor, and upped it even more to add in an element of turn-based strategy. The fact that you can not only use your minions, not only rely on pulling good cards out and using those at the right time, but also in the fact it's how you play tactically that will ultimately define and win a battle, means that this is just an absolutely superb game. Every which way. If you like Hearthstone, if you like games like Elder Scrolls Legends, then Duelist is that +1. This year's number 6 is Paradox Interactive's number 1 4X sci-fi strategy game, Stellaris, and it is absolutely phenomenal. Stellaris took everything I loved about 4X sci-fi strategy games and combined them into one. You had empire management, you had expansion, you had armies, you had ground and aerial warfare, you had a great diplomacy system, interesting races, great visuals, and it was just as nearer as a complete package a game could come to satisfying that need for a good sci-fi 4X strategy. Now, the game did launch with a couple of issues, including the fact that the mid to late game content was lacking in certain departments. Thankfully, since then, the various patches and content updates that have came out, including the Leviathan's DLC, has secured its place at this top spot. Number 5 is, of course, Overwatch, probably the best team-based first-person shooter in the last decade, barring Team Fortress 2, and it thoroughly deserves it. Now, while I was more of a fan of Battleborn because I liked Battleborn's core mechanics more, it was undeniable how good Overwatch was. It was clean, it was fluid, it was competitive, and it was a hell of a lot of fun. Even if I'd preferred other games to it, I had an absolute blast with Overwatch, like the many millions of players have. Blizzard have had a really good year, have they not, with this massive success of Legion and Overwatch thoroughly deserves its place at my number 5. Its team-based focused mechanics, the fact that there were so many complementary ways to form a team, the different characters, the unique mechanics that each character has, and to be honest, my favourite thing about Overwatch wasn't even the gameplay. It was the fact that they created this universe, this world, these characters that were so enticing, that they were so lovable, and the rest of the world seemed to agree with me, and it was an IP that has really captured the heart of minds of millions and millions of gamers. So I would really like Blizzard, if they are watching, to make me an Overwatch film. Thank you very much, and good day, sir. Coming in at number 4 is The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine expansion. Now, some of you might say, well, it's not really technically a game. Well, it was an expansion, it was a standalone, and it had over 20 hours of gameplay, which is more than a lot of games do these days. So it certainly deserves a place at the top of my list. The Witcher 3 was one of the best RPGs in the last decade, and is certainly set to be one of the most influential for some time to come. While the main game did come out in 2015, 2016 did see the addition of the Blood and Wine expansion, a 20-hour plus expansion that had enough content to be considered a game in its own right. Blood and Wine is the last addition to The Witcher 3 to tell Geralt of Rivia's last story, far removed from the bleakness of Vizima into the lands of wine and beauty of Toussaint. Now, Blood and Wine adds some fantastic story-driven experiences and brings the vampire threat into true focus like no other Witcher game has done before. With fantastic writing, characters, and an action-packed story, Blood and Wine was an expansion worth its weight in Gwent cards. My number 3 is Inside, a 2.5D puzzle platformer that was developed by Limbo's developer Playdead. Inside really came out of nowhere for me. I am a big proponent that I do not like puzzle platformers. I even less like 2D puzzle platformers. I find them tedious, I find them boring, and I really dislike the entire genre as a whole for the most part. Inside, however, was are phenomenal, and it is a game that is a masterclass in how to create a compelling world, a compelling art design, a compelling atmosphere, and have people who don't like the genre enjoy the genre, because that is exactly what Inside did for me. It made me play the entirety of a 2D puzzle platformer and enjoy it consistently throughout. But that is a feat in and of itself, but it isn't what Inside did best. Inside created such a dark, fantastic atmosphere and maintained that atmospheric tone throughout. It created a world that was intriguing, that I wanted to find out more. It explored various different dark themes such as scientific experiments, mind control. In this dystopian world, you wanted to find out why this boy was being hunted, where he was going, what his objective was, what was his motivations, with some fantastic endings that were really just mind-blowing. And overall, it was just an amazing game that other developers should really look at if they're intending on creating a dark atmospheric world. Go and ask Playdead how to do it, because this is a masterclass. This year's number 2 for me is something that I hold dear to my heart. Of course, a Total War game and Warhammer. Total War Warhammer. Creative Assembly and Games Workshop teaming up to create this game was a dream come true for many fans, and it was something that frankly I looked upon coming up into it with a great deal of skepticism, knowing how rocky Total War Rome 2 was, knowing how bad most Warhammer video games are. It was something that could have easily been an absolute disaster. Thankfully, it was the opposite end of a disaster. What they created was a fantastic game that centered around the Warhammer Fantasy IP. It was a game where each faction had unique campaign and in-battle mechanics. Each faction had different gameplay styles, which meant the replayability of the game was absolutely through the roof. On top of this, the multiple DLCs, which I'll agree, some of them are not only overpriced, but some of them are absolutely criminal, including the Blood for the Blood God, which simply added a blood special effect into the game. You have no right charging for that. The reason that it doesn't matter is the fact that even if you just bought the base game and you do not buy any of the faction expansions, your core gameplay experience is still enriched by having that. So the way that I play the Empire now is markedly different from the way I played the Empire at the start of the game's lifespan. You know, the addition of the Wood Elves now, the addition of the Beastmen completely changed the way that I play the main campaign, and it is something that it enriches players' experience by having those new enemies in there than it did before. And so even if you didn't purchase the DLC, which some of the DLC was fantastic, it certainly enriched the core game experience. My hat goes off to Creative Assembly with Total War Warhammer. It is a fantastic start to the 3 trilogy games that they're going to be making out of the Total War Warhammer franchise. It was a fantastic game, continues to be a fantastic game. It is a game that I've put nearly 200 hours into and continue to play, with so many different factions, uniqueness, the multiplayer is pretty solid, and it's just something that was a joy to behold. And as RTS games go, certainly probably the best of the year, hands down. This year's number 1 is a game that came out in January and originally surfaced in 2015 on Steam's Early Access platform. It is one of the few games on Steam Early Access that has been a really big hit, and rightly so, because it is a absolutely top quality games. It is, of course, Darkest Dungeon. Developed by Red Hook Games, Darkest Dungeon is a turn-based roguelike RPG that was designed to be about the psychological stresses of adventuring. You would take your adventurers to try and reclaim a mansion and the surrounding areas from the basic spawns of hell, and it would be about managing your heroes' stress levels, their psychological breaks, as well as all of the traditional things like leveling up, managing their abilities, making sure that your formation is correct, and all the things that go into a tactics turn-based RPG. For me, Darkest Dungeon is just one of those rare indie games that just stands high and mighty above the rest. Its quality is paramount. Its art style is vivid and unique. Its story is interesting. Its mechanics are solid. And the core of the game is just so fun to play. It balances perfectly that line that roguelikes tend to get wrong, in the sense of it balances that punishment and pleasure kind of mix. And the game will punish you, it will be unfair, but it is addictive as all hell and will have you coming back for more. I truly can't find enough nice things to say about this game. It is just truly an incredible game. The developers have also done a good job with keeping up to date with their patches and making sure that there's tons of post-launch support, and this game deserved every success that it got. It was incredible throughout. It was a joy to play, it's a joy to go back and play, and the replayability and longevity of this game is just phenomenal. I have to say, it deserves the top spot on my list this year. It was a game that I returned to again and again and again throughout the year, and I will hold it up as how to make a really great indie game and how to make a really great early access game for years to come, because this game was superb. And that is my top 10 games of the year for 2016. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know if you disagree or agreed with my thoughts. Let me know what games you would have in your top 10. And as always, I will see you next time.